Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are going to take a look at yet another of these newer 2021 Schleich figures as we take a look at the second to last of these, I guess, potentially the first wave, because sometimes Schleich will randomly release a few figures later in the year, but I don't know for sure if that's going to happen this year. But as far as the newer figures that have just come out, this is the second to last. This is the Pachycephalosaurus, and it's, again, another of those figures that personally, as far as I'm concerned, I don't think it's quite as bad as the promotional images had kind of led me to believe. I thought it looked okay in the promo images, but just somewhat awkward looking. But here in person, again, looking at it straight away as I just got it out of the package, I don't think it's half bad at all. I'm not a huge fan of what I can see there with the eyes, but as far as the overall figure goes, again, it's not terrible, and it's another kind of a surprising Schleich release for this year as far as me actually liking it a little more than I thought I would. That's kind of been like the theme of pretty much this entire line so far. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get a closer look at this Schleich Pachycephalosaurus. So starting up here at the head sculpt, you can see some pretty nice scale detail in the head sculpt, and everything in that area looks pretty good for the most part as far as the very fine detailing goes. Pretty decent looking paint application for the figure as well. The eyes I'm not a huge fan of just because they're such a dark brown. I feel like they kind of mesh a little too much with that brownish coloration that kind of runs up around the eye. It's actually more of like a maroon almost, but the brown eye just doesn't shine through all that well with the darker coloration around the eye. One area I really don't like is the mouth. The mouth looks ridiculous. It makes him look like he has two giant buck teeth, and almost SpongeBob-like, I will say. So this area I absolutely really do not like at all. You can see the nostrils sculpted out, though. The nostrils look pretty decent overall, but the entire mouth actually almost has like a donkey-like appearance. Like he almost looks like a donkey. But moving up here to the top of the head, the dome skull and everything, as well as kind of all of the spikes and everything for the top of the head of the Pachycephalosaurus do look pretty nice, and they're all really nicely brought out as far as the dark wash that is included, something that Schleich has included on every one of the figures that we've reviewed so far from this year. The opposing side of the head sculpt also, again, looks okay. I mean, it doesn't look great. The overall shape of the head and the structure of the head personally isn't really all that wonderful. It's not near as nice as the Dracorex Schleich previously released, but again, it's also not as bad as I initially thought it would be, and the eye, although glossed quite nicely, once again kind of just meshes in with the coloration around the eye a little too much for my taste. Once you move down into the neck, though, you can see lots of really nice skin wrinkles and everything, kind of some saggy skin and all that fun stuff going on there in the neck. The dark wash continues to bring the detail out quite nicely on the figure overall. Moving back into the body, you can see the shoulder blade a little bit right there in that area. The arms, I'm not too big of a fan of. You can see the elbow there. You can see some musculature pretty decently, but just like the very strong, like solid line there for the arm just kind of takes the life out of the figure. It doesn't really look too lifelike. It's just way too straight right there for my liking. You can see that the hands do lighten to kind of a light gray or like a creamy kind of a white sort of, and there's again the dark wash that brings that detail out quite nicely in the hands. Moving back into the stomach, you can see some really nice scale detail throughout the entire stomach and up here onto the back. The scales up here on the back are actually really nice, very nice, and numerous different sizes of scales. Really like the overall detailing there in the back, and you can see a line of ridges that run along the spinal column, as well as quite a few lines of sort of osteoderms or scutes that run along the side of the figure. I do actually quite like the coloration. Overall, I think it's a really nice kind of a yellowish coloration, and that darker wash that they've applied makes all the scale detail pop in very nice fashion. And then there's kind of like a maroonish color pretty much all over the figure in different areas. It's pretty unique, pretty different looking if you ask me. You can make out the hip bone pretty nicely right there, as well as some decent musculature displayed here in the leg, both the thigh and calf region. Pretty nice looking foot sculpt, although a little too large probably for the figure, but you have some nice scoots down the toes there, as well as a nice maroonish color kind of mixing with a little hint of like yellows here and there at the tips of the toes, and then you have a nice gray for the claws, as well as actually a wash on the claws, which looks pretty cool. I do like the way the skin is kind of reacting here in the stomach, stretching off of the body there with the leg really nice attention to detail on the part of Schleich. And then moving back here, you can see actually a little bit of variation of color here on the underside, some darker tones of color, some yellows and stuff showing up. So the coloration is pretty decent on it, and again, that dark wash makes all the scale detail pop in a very realistic way. And then as we move out the length of the tail, there's a very nice curve to the tail. Lots more of those kind of scoots and osteoderms and ridges and stuff that run out the course of the tail. The tail primarily becomes that maroonish coloration overall. And then looking at the opposing side, again, you have kind of those wrinkles and stuff in the skin, some saggy skin here in the throat. You can kind of make out the throat in general there on the underside of the Pachycephalosaurus. The shoulder blade is present again. Once again, the arm looks super straight right here. I'm not super sold on that area, but it doesn't look that bad on this side. I feel like it looks a little better over here. Kind of an awkward looking like skin folding going on right here, right behind the arm though, which is very strange. You can see some nice movement shown in the sculpt right here as far as the leg pushing into the body, bunching up the skin right there in the stomach region, which is pretty nicely shown throughout the sculpt of this figure. Again, some more beautiful scale detail. I really quite like the stripes that run down the back of the Pachycephalosaurus as well. You can see the rear leg is also quite nicely sculpted, beautifully defined musculature throughout. You can see the kneecap right there in the front, and then yet another nice looking foot sculpt. Similarly painted, but it seems like there's less yellow on this side at the tips of the toes, but you can see the nails are really nicely painted, just like we had seen on the previous side. Dew claws are present as well. I do like the skin stretching off of the tail right here as the leg is pulling forward, stretching that skin quite nicely. So the overall attention to detail as far as like the movement of the animal goes is really nicely shown in the sculpt. And then we lead out the length of the tail, and the tail again continues to look quite nice overall. Really nice curve to it, and overall decent looking scale detail, beautifully sculpted underside as well as far as like the scale detail and the fine detailing in general on the underside. And there is a really nice dark wash here on the underside that you can see is very abundant, but overall, again, surprisingly better than I expected. But I think this area of the Pachycephalosaurus pretty much ruins the figure. So as far as a size goes on our Pachycephalosaurus, for a length, you are looking at about 9 inches or 23 centimeters. For a height, the highest point's definitely the tail, a little bit above 4¼ inches or 11 centimeters, and then to the top of the head about 3½, maybe a little over, or 9 centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pachycephalosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line, showing you that yet again, this figure is again in a similar size range to quite a few of the others, in a mid-sized range to like a medium-sized figure, I would say. Although the Pachy actually does sport some pretty good size overall. It's actually, I think, a little bigger potentially than the Ceratosaurus. So we'll bring that in and take a look at those two together. So there is the Ceratosaurus and the Pachycephalosaurus next to each other. And I think in overall body mass, the Pachycephalosaurus might just be a little thicker than the Ceratosaurus, but they are actually very similarly sized, it seems, in length and height. As far as a size go, I would say the Ceratosaurus and Pachycephalosaurus are actually quite similar. So this 2021 Pachycephalosaurus from Schleich is pretty interesting, but it's definitely now, we're kind of on like a slant of downhill. We started with the Caprasuchus, beautiful figure. Second was the Ceratosaurus, really nice figure as well. Then we went to the Mosasaurus, which was passable. I mean, it was interesting. I'll give it that. Now we're at this Pachycephalosaurus, and although I think most of the figure actually looks pretty nice, the awkward looking mouth area kind of messes the entire figure up for me. And then next would be the Brontosaurus, which, just wait till we get to that point. But as far as this Pachycephalosaurus goes, again, I think a lot of the figure looks really nice. A lot of the detailing looks beautiful as far as like the scale detail and the movement shown throughout the sculpt. I think Schleich has done a very good job here as far as really capturing a lot of life in the actual sculpt of the figure. The feet definitely look like they're a bit too large overall, obviously built bigger for stability, but I feel like they could have definitely made the feet smaller and it would have still balanced quite nicely. And then we get to the mouth area, and the mouth, again, looking almost horse-like, is very strange and definitely a pretty big downside for the figure as a whole. I feel like when you mess something like the mouth of a dinosaur up, and that can really take away a lot as far as the appeal factor of the figure, and I feel like that's definitely something that's happened here with the Pachycephalosaurus. If they would have created like that beak-like look for the Pachycephalosaurus's mouth in a much more realistic and natural way, I feel like the figure as a whole could have been pretty darn nice, but the beak being so weird looking definitely is a big takeaway from the figure that I'm not too excited about personally. I think the coloration as well is quite nicely done, though. Beautifully applied, really nice and natural overall, and another interesting look as far as the coloration used. Schleich somehow manages to make colors like maroon and everything look quite natural on the figures, and I think that's pretty much exactly what they've done here with this Pachycephalosaurus. So if you would like to pick this Pachycephalosaurus up, I will include a link in the description to where you can do that on everythingdinosaur.com. So make sure you check the description, go buy this newest 2021 Schleich Pachycephalosaurus, and make sure you also like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.